Well, hello, Phoenix. It's good to be with you again. Oh, thank you, Jan. She said welcome back. I'm excited to be here today, and I have a story for you about a pilgrimage that I took. Now, I know UUs and pilgrimages, like that seems way too religious for us. Where are we pilgrimaging to? But I heard that you actually have a class happening, right, Jan? This fall about pilgrimage. So, yeah, I'm excited about this. Next Sunday, she says. I know. So my pilgrimage was to Memphis, Tennessee, and I went to the Civil Rights Museum at the Lorraine Motel. It was the site of MLK's assassination, and there's a really amazing museum there at that site now. And as I walked around the museum, I was looking for lessons to take back from the civil rights movement, something that every organizer is wise to study. And looking around this museum, there were several threads of lessons that feel really applicable to today, the time we're in right now. So I pulled out some of those threads for us. The first one I noticed right away at the Civil Rights Museum is that even though it was a really important site specifically to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the museum didn't focus on him alone. It did a really incredible job of recognizing movement and all of the people that make up what was a people's movement. And I think this is really significant because sometimes in US dominant culture, we can fall into the trap of looking for a messianic narrative, right? Who's the savior that's going to come down? And maybe in the 60s it was MLK, right? He just came out of nowhere and just snapped his fingers, spoke some beautiful words, and racism was gone, right? Is that how it happened? No, it's not, right? But we can kind of fall into the trap of writing history that way and thinking that that's how it happened. Now, no shade on MLK. He was an incredible speaker. We quote his words over and over today. But MLK was not the movement. The civil rights movement was a people's movement. And in fact, he got drafted in to the civil rights movement because he was such a powerful speaker and minister and leader. But the museum did a really amazing job of lifting up all the voices, right? Because it was actually a really small grassroots movement that popped up in several different places throughout the South that created this entire sea change in the US, right? The museum also lifted up the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and one of my personal heroes, Ella Baker, who did a lot of work behind the scenes organizing, didn't need to be out in the front. It also told the story of Rosa Parks, and I appreciated that it told the real story of Rosa Parks. They had a model of the bus that she was famously on, but sometimes we tell that story and we think, oh, Rosa Parks, one day she just got tired and just sat down on the front of the bus, spur of the moment. She was tired and said she wasn't going to move. That's not how it happened at all, right? Rosa Parks trained for weeks at the Highlander Center, and it was an organized movement to challenge the desegregation law on buses. She was an organizer, and she was the one who risked arrest, but there were dozens of people behind her making sure that there was jail support happening for when she got arrested. And in fact, Claudette Colvin had tried it 6 months earlier as part of the same organizing campaign, but because she was arrested for something other than the desegregation law, they couldn't use her action to challenge the law. And so when we think about these heroes of the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, it's wise of us to remember that it was really everyday people like us that made this movement. Everyday people sitting in at lunch counters, boycotting the buses, even to get to work, participating in freedom rides, Mississippi Freedom Summer. That's what made up the civil rights movement. And it's important for us to remember that today because sometimes, I don't know if you do this, but I do this, sometimes it would be nice to just wait for a hero to come in and take care of it for us. I promised I wouldn't do a sermon about the Barbie movie, but I'm going to make one Barbie movie reference. If if anyone has seen the Barbie movie, you know that at one point Barbie wanted to give up too, right? She was like, oh, she laid down face first in the artificial grass and said, oh, I just wish a smarter Barbie would come in and solve this for us. Does anyone ever feel like that sometimes? We could use an MLK to come in and wave his magical words and fix the problems that we have today. But it's just us. And it's always just been us. And so at UUJAZ, we really center providing opportunities for everyone to be involved. Because not all of us can speak like MLK, I certainly can't. But some of us can start a fundraiser, like Sam Kirkland did yesterday for his birthday. Some of us can lead a group or write postcards, donate if they can, bring water bottles down to the marchers. There's all sorts of ways to get involved. And it takes a bunch of little actions from everyday people to change the world. So the next thread I encountered on my pilgrimage was a political thread. I looked for the mention of politicians all throughout the Civil Rights Museum. And I wasn't that surprised at what I found. There was one exhibit that centered the phone calls between JFK and MLK. And a lot of the communication was, you know, Martin, I believe in what you're doing, but this isn't really great timing. We've got a campaign going here, and, you know, I think we can do it, but could it wait a few years? This isn't really great for my campaign, and, you know, I agree with your message, but not really the way you're going about it. Do you think you could maybe tone it down? Do these words sound familiar to anyone? Right? It's always what happens. Frederick Douglass is often quoted as saying, power concedes nothing without demand. And the Civil Rights Movement was an example of that, because even LBJ, who eventually signed the Civil Rights Act, he had to be pushed to do that. Sometimes we think about voting as the answer to all our problems. If we just vote a certain way, then everything will be solved. But politicians have never been the one to come in and wave a magic wand and fix all of our problems. They do what the people who elect them or the people who fund their campaigns want them to do. And so it's up to us to push them in the direction. One of my favorite phrases in organizing is we elect targets, not saviors. So when we vote, we elect the people that we think we can push to live out our UU values in office. The other thread I looked for was the role of the church. Surprise, surprise. So as I walked around the exhibits, I noticed whenever they mentioned church work in the Civil Rights Movement, and there was a lot. Churches were centers of organizing all throughout the South. And one exhibit showed a map of many churches throughout the South that were bombed for their involvement in the Civil Rights Movement. Lots of churches. In fact, out in your memorial garden, you have statues of 4 of the girls who died in the Birmingham church bombing. And this is hard, because today we know that there's fear around what might happen if we are a target of that kind of violence. But here's what I know. I know what my values call me to do, and I don't want to live with the feeling of not taking action that matches my values, no matter the consequences. And I also know that as community, we know how to keep each other safe. Not that long ago, we did a de-escalation and safety training here at UU Phoenix. It was attended by almost 50 people to talk about what it means to create community safety. And community safety is a different paradigm than individual safety. Community safety says for all of us to experience safety, some of us that experience more safety in the world already have to take a little bit more risk so that those of us who are at more risk in our daily lives can experience a little more safety. And together we can keep each other safe. But Dr. Martin Luther King had a lot to say about the church as well. His words are a little more powerful than mine. In 1967, he said, "The church must be reminded that it is not the master or the servant of the state, but rather the conscience of the state and never its tool. If the church does not recapture its prophetic zeal, it will become an irrelevant social club without moral or spiritual authority." Ouch. But this is why we're UUs, right? We don't come to church as a social club. We come to church to be a community, to support each other on our own spiritual paths, and to change the world, to make justice real. And it can be hard, right? I have a friend who sent me, while I was in Memphis, a text with a link to an article. And it was the declassified 1944 handbook from what would become the CIA on how to destroy an organization from within. So he sent me this because he knew I was in Memphis, and he was kind of joking about the CIA and the conspiracy theories around MLK, and I don't want to go down that path with you all because I know we could do that for a long time. But I found this article really interesting, so I want to read you some pieces of it. How to destroy an organization from within. Insist on doing everything through proper channels. Never permit shortcuts to expedite decisions. Number 2, when possible, refer all matters to committees for further study and consideration. Attempt to make the committees as large as possible, never less than 5 people. 3, make speeches. Uh-oh. Talk as frequently as possible and at great length. I might be in trouble for this one. Number 4, haggle over precise wording of all your communications, minutes, and resolutions. I could go on, but I think you already recognize this. Does this sound like our workplaces, our government, maybe sometimes our churches, maybe our wider association? The CIA knew how to destroy organizations they disagreed with from within. We probably shouldn't help them out and do it to ourselves. So what do we do instead? This is depressing. How do we make change? How do we organize and create movement? Because we know there's a lot of need for it right now. I was at camp last week and I spent a lot of time with a young trans teen who lives in Florida. And he was in California with his aunt trying to decide if he could go back to his state, his family, his friends, his school, or if he needed to live with his aunt for a year in California because it wasn't safe for him to be where he was. We have refugees fleeing states in the United States. But here's what I know. I know that UUs know how to live out our values through action. I know that love is a verb, not just a feeling, but a thing that we do. Because when we put on those Side with Love t-shirts, I'm going to try to make a sports metaphor. I'm not really a sports person, but hang in there with me. When we put on those yellow t-shirts, they're not just jerseys, right? We don't say Side with Love, and we get to say, I'm on the right side, the left side. I'm on the side of love, and that's all I have to do. Put on the t-shirt, attend church, say a few words, and just give ourselves a pass, right? We don't do that as UUs. We know that social justice is not a spectator sport, that we have to take action. And here's how I know it's real. This March, almost 60 people in Tucson got trained from UUJAZ in all levels of OWL, our sex ed program. As a response to the repeal of Roe v. Wade, UUJAZ said, what can we do to help? And one of those ways was to make sure that every child and adult had access to the information they need to know to keep themselves safe and make healthy reproductive choices. And if our state won't let kids have sex ed in school, then we'll do it in our churches. And 60 of you came to Tucson and got certified, and that means all churches in the state of Arizona, all UU churches in the state of Arizona are offering OWL this year. That's how I know love is a verb, and I also know love is a verb because 3,000 UUs across the country participated in Beloved Conversations, our anti-racism program, since 2020. And in fact, there's a Beloved Conversations pod here that is still meeting 3 years later because it was so valuable for them to continue their anti-racism work. Good job, ladies. I know love is a verb because so many of you volunteer over at the IRC's Welcome Center that every time I'm there in my consultancy job, reorganizing their volunteer program, I run into a UU every single time. You're there every day, every week, supporting refugees, making sure they have a meal and a set of clothes and a plane ticket to where they're going to end up next. I know you're living out your values, and I see that when I see you there. I know that love is a verb. Love is a verb because in this congregation and in many other across the country in 2022, you participated in UU the Vote. And Jenny and John and a lot of you participated in making your congregation here a good trouble congregation, which means that you did things you've never done before, knocked on people's doors, phone banked, sent postcards, became poll watchers. You did so much, in fact, that you were recognized by the UUA as a good trouble congregation when only 24 across the country achieved that status, and 4 of them were in the state of Arizona. That's how Yes. That's how I know love is a verb. I know love is a verb because of the safety and de-escalation trainings we did when people were scared about what might happen if there was a violent critical incident in one of our churches. 50 of you came and said, I'm kind of scared, but I'd rather learn and be prepared so I can keep each other safe. That's how I know love is a verb. I know love is a verb because when Washington School Board decided to say, we are going to cancel our contract with a Christian university that had hateful rhetoric in their student pledges, and we don't want any student teachers coming from an organization who say queer people like myself are an abomination, and they cannot be around our students. It is not safe. And the Washington School Board made that decision, and the next meeting, when there were protests, Brigida and myself and a bunch of us showed up on her very first day in Arizona, in fact, Brigida showed up to that school board meeting and made sure that they also heard from religious leaders who said, you did the right thing according to our religious values. That's how I know love is a verb. You keep showing up. Yes. I know love is a verb because for the last 5 years, we've been on an LGBTQ statewide coalition. And even before we had the current governor, for 5 years, every single anti-trans bill that came to the state legislature, we beat down. It wasn't supposed to be able to happen in Arizona, but our coalition was so strong that we made sure that none of that passed. And this year, we've got to sit back and watch the governor veto every single one because of a lot of your work. That's how I know love is a verb. I know love is a verb. Yes. Yes, I know that love is a verb because coming up, we have an opportunity from our Reproductive Justice Coalition to pass a petition to put abortion on the ballot in 2024. And I know it hasn't even started yet, but I know how many of you are going to pick up a clipboard, learn how to get signatures, and make sure that that gets on the ballot this year. Yes, so many of you. I know that love is a verb because I've seen you do it before. With Healthcare Rising, one of our partners on the last ballot, that ballot initiative, that was not proposed by any politician. That was a people's initiative. And do you know that when that passed, Healthcare Rising, 74% margin, higher than any other statewide race on the ballot? And you all did that. You used with clipboards, walking around, getting signatures, making sure that the people's voice is heard. I know that love is a verb because you all show me every day through all the work you do connected to UUJAZ and our partners. Love is a verb you use. Say it with me. Love is a verb.
Love is a verb.
One more time. Love is a verb. Yes. Keep going.
Love is
Thank
a verb.
you. Yes. Thank you.